Welcome to my channel Starwire Daily. Please share and subscribe and press the bell icon for new updates. April 8th, 1994. Seattle's grunge scene is mourning the loss of its king. Kurt Cobain, the tortured genius behind Nirvana, has been found dead in his greenhouse, a shotgun by his side, and what appears to be a suicide note nearby. The world accepted the tragic narrative of a troubled artist who couldn't escape his demons. But what if I told you that 30 years later, explosive new evidence is threatening to unravel everything we thought we knew about that fateful day? Welcome back to Starwire Daily, where we dive deep into the stories that shape our culture. I'm your host, and today we're exploring a bombshell that's sending shockwaves through the music world and beyond. Fresh allegations about handwriting forgery in Kurt Cobain's supposed suicide note are reigniting one of rock history's most controversial conspiracy theories. And trust me, what you're about to hear will make you question everything. Let's rewind to the beginning of this incredible story. Kurt Donald Cobain wasn't just another rock star. He was a cultural phenomenon who defined an entire generation. Born in Aberdeen, Washington, this small-town kid with bleached blonde hair and piercing blue eyes would grow up to become the reluctant voice of Generation X. But behind the fame, the fortune, and the legendary performances, Kurt was fighting battles that most of us could never imagine. By 1994, Nirvana had conquered the world. Nevermind had sold over 30 million copies worldwide. In Utero proved they weren't just a one-hit wonder, and Kurt had become the poster child for alternative rock. But success came with a price that seemed almost too heavy to bear. His marriage to Courtney Love was turbulent and public. His heroin addiction was spiraling out of control. And the pressure of fame was crushing a man who never wanted to be a spokesperson for anything. On March 30th, 1994, just 9 days before his death, Kurt fled from a Los Angeles intervention staged by his friends and family. He was supposed to enter rehab, but instead, he disappeared into the Seattle rain. What happened during those lost days? The official story says he spent them alone, contemplating his final act. But conspiracy theorists have always wondered if something far more sinister was unfolding. Then came April 8th, the discovery that would shock the world and launch 1,000 theories. Kurt's body was found by electrician Gary Smith, who had come to install a security system at the Lake Washington home. The scene appeared straightforward to investigators. Kurt had injected himself with a massive dose of heroin, 3 times the lethal amount, then shot himself with a 20-gauge shotgun. Beside him lay a note, written in what appeared to be his handwriting, explaining his decision to end his life. Case closed, right? Not so fast. From the very beginning, something didn't sit right with certain investigators and Kurt's fans. The note itself was unusual. Most of it read like a retirement letter, talking about his loss of passion for music and his desire to leave the spotlight. It was only in the final lines that it took on the tone of a suicide note. And those final lines? Well, that's where our story gets really interesting. Enter Tom Grant, the private investigator hired by Courtney Love herself to find Kurt when he first went missing. Grant expected to close a simple missing person case, but what he discovered launched him into a decades-long crusade that would make him both famous and infamous in equal measure. Grant began noticing inconsistencies immediately. The positioning of the shotgun, the massive amount of heroin in Kurt's system, an amount that should have rendered him physically incapable of pulling a trigger. And most importantly, that note. Grant wasn't the only one with questions. Rosemary Carroll, Kurt and Courtney's entertainment lawyer, had expressed concerns about the note's authenticity almost immediately. She noticed that the handwriting seemed different in the final, most crucial lines, the lines that actually reference suicide and death. The body of the note was undeniably Kurt's writing, but those last few sentences? They raised red flags for someone who had seen Kurt's handwriting countless times. But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. For years, these concerns remained largely in the realm of conspiracy theories and internet forums. The Seattle Police Department maintained their position. Kurt Cobain died by suicide, period. The case was closed, the family had suffered enough, and it was time to let the dead rest in peace. Fast forward to today, and the landscape has completely changed. Advanced forensic handwriting analysis techniques that didn't exist in 1994 are now standard practice. Computer programs can detect the most subtle variations in pressure, angle, and stroke patterns. And when these modern techniques were recently applied to high-resolution scans of Kurt's note, the results were absolutely stunning. Multiple handwriting experts, working independently, have now concluded that there are significant anomalies in the final portion of the note. We're talking about measurable differences in pen pressure, letter formation, and writing rhythm that suggest the possibility, and I emphasize possibility, that those crucial final lines may not have been written by the same hand that penned the rest of the letter. Dr. Reginald Rivard, a court-certified handwriting analyst with over 30 years of experience, recently went on record with findings that are shaking the foundation of the official narrative. His analysis revealed what he calls dramatic inconsistencies in the note's final paragraph. The spacing between letters changes, the pressure applied to the pen shifts significantly, and most tellingly, the natural flow of Kurt's distinctive writing style appears to break down completely. But wait, it gets even more intriguing. Remember, we're not just talking about random conspiracy theorists anymore. We're talking about credentialed experts using cutting-edge technology to analyze evidence that's been sitting in police files for 3 decades. And their findings are raising questions that go far beyond simple handwriting analysis. For instance, why was the note photographed by police before the final lines were discovered? Early crime scene photos show the note positioned in a way that obscures its bottom portion. It wasn't until later examination that the full text, including the suicide references, became visible. Coincidence? Maybe. But it's exactly these kinds of details that are fueling the current resurgence of interest in the case. Here's what makes this story so compelling and, frankly, so heartbreaking. Kurt Cobain wasn't just a musician. He was a cultural icon who gave voice to millions of young people struggling with depression, alienation, and the feeling of not fitting in. His death sent shockwaves through a generation that had found hope and identity in his music. The idea that his final message might have been manipulated, that his voice might have been stolen even in death. It's a betrayal that cuts deeper than just celebrity gossip. And let's talk about the elephant in the room, motive. Who would want Kurt Cobain dead and why? This is where the conspiracy theories get dark, and where we need to tread carefully between investigation and speculation. Some theorists point to financial motives. Kurt's estate was worth millions, and his death would trigger certain contractual obligations and insurance payouts. Others suggest that Kurt's growing disillusionment with fame and his talk of leaving the music industry made him a liability to powerful interests. But perhaps the most compelling aspect of the recent developments isn't the conspiracy theories themselves. It's the systematic way in which they're being examined. Modern cold case investigations have shown us that even seemingly solid conclusions can crumble under the weight of new technology and fresh perspectives. DNA evidence has overturned countless convictions. Advanced ballistics analysis has solved decades-old mysteries. And now, sophisticated handwriting analysis is breathing new life into questions that many thought were settled forever. The Seattle Police Department, for their part, has remained largely silent on these new developments. They've consistently maintained that they thoroughly investigated Kurt's death and that all evidence pointed to suicide. But critics argue that the investigation was rushed, that the crime scene wasn't properly secured, and that certain pieces of evidence were overlooked or mishandled. Consider this chilling detail that's often overlooked. Kurt's credit card was used after his estimated time of death. Someone was using his financial information while his body lay undiscovered in that greenhouse. The official explanation? Computer error, delayed processing, nothing to see here. But an investigation where every detail matters, these kinds of anomalies take on a more sinister significance. And then there's the question of access. Kurt's home wasn't exactly a public space. Whoever might have been involved in any potential foul play would have needed intimate knowledge of his routines, his security systems, and his whereabouts. This wasn't a random crime of opportunity. If it was a crime at all, it was carefully planned and executed by someone with inside access to Kurt's life. What's particularly fascinating about this case is how it reflects our broader relationship with celebrity culture and the stories we tell ourselves about fame. Kurt Cobain represented authenticity in an increasingly manufactured world. He was the anti-celebrity celebrity, the reluctant icon who just wanted to make music and be left alone. His death fit a certain narrative about the price of fame, the tortured artist archetype, the idea that genius and self-destruction go hand in hand. But what if that narrative was too neat, too convenient? What if the real story is messier, more complicated, and far more disturbing than we were ready to accept in 1994? The recent handwriting analysis isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of a broader movement to re-examine high-profile deaths that were quickly closed and forgotten. We've seen this with cases ranging from Marilyn Monroe to Princess Diana to Michael Jackson. Each new generation brings new technology, new perspectives, and new willingness to question official narratives that previous generations accepted without debate. In Kurt's case, the timing is particularly significant. We're now far enough removed from his death that the initial shock and grief have faded, replaced by a more analytical curiosity about what really happened. The people who were young fans in 1994 are now adults with their own platforms, their own resources, and their own determination to uncover the truth about their hero's final days. But here's where the story gets even more complex. The handwriting analysis, as compelling as it is, exists in a legal and cultural gray area. Even if experts definitively prove that portions of the note were forged, what then? The case was officially closed decades ago. Key evidence may have been lost or compromised. Witnesses have died or disappeared. And the main suspects in any conspiracy theory, well, let's just say that pursuing justice after 30 years is a complicated proposition. Yet that hasn't stopped the investigators, both professional and amateur, who continue to dig into every aspect of Kurt's final days. They've analyzed the trajectory of the shotgun blast, questioned the logistics of the drug timeline, and scrutinized every person who had access to Kurt in his final weeks. The picture that emerges is far more complicated than the simple suicide narrative that was initially accepted. And let's not forget the human cost of these revelations. Kurt's daughter, Frances Bean Cobain, has had to live her entire life in the shadow of these conspiracy theories. Every new development, every fresh analysis, brings renewed attention to the most traumatic event in her family's history. The responsible way to pursue truth must balance the search for justice with respect for the ongoing pain of those left behind. Courtney Love, too, has been subjected to decades of speculation and accusation, much of it focused on her tumultuous relationship with Kurt and her alleged involvement in his death. While she's always maintained her innocence and grief, the constant scrutiny has undoubtedly taken its toll. The ethical implications of continuing to investigate are as complex as the technical aspects of the case itself. So where does this leave us? The recent handwriting analysis has certainly raised legitimate questions that deserve serious consideration. But it's important to distinguish between raising questions and providing answers. Forensic handwriting analysis, while sophisticated, isn't infallible. Experts can disagree, techniques can be flawed, and even the most advanced analysis can't always account for variables like drug use, emotional state, or simple changes in writing conditions. What we're really witnessing is the evolution of a cultural mystery that has taken on a life of its own. The question of whether Kurt Cobain was murdered has become almost as significant as the question of who Kurt Cobain actually was. It's a story that says as much about our relationship with celebrity, mortality, and truth as it does about the specific circumstances of one man's death. The fascinating thing about conspiracy theories, and yes, we need to call them what they are, is how they often contain kernels of legitimate concern wrapped in layers of speculation and assumption. The Kurt Cobain case is a perfect example. There were indeed unusual aspects to his death that warranted closer examination. There were indeed procedural issues with the initial investigation that raised valid questions. And there are indeed aspects of the official narrative that don't perfectly align with the physical evidence. But the leap from there are unanswered questions to therefore it was murder is exactly that, a leap. And it's a leap that the recent handwriting analysis, while fascinating and important, doesn't necessarily justify. What the new evidence does accomplish is something perhaps more valuable than solving the mystery outright. It forces us to confront our assumptions about truth, justice, and the stories we tell ourselves about our heroes. Kurt Cobain was a complicated person living in complicated times, and his death reflects that complexity in ways that a simple suicide narrative might not fully capture. The handwriting analysis reminds us that truth is often more elusive than we'd like to believe, that our need for closure sometimes conflicts with the messy reality of real events, and that even decades later, new evidence can emerge to challenge what we thought we knew for certain. Perhaps most importantly, this renewed investigation into Kurt's death is a testament to the lasting impact of his life and music. 30 years after his death, people are still fighting for him, still seeking justice on his behalf, still refusing to let his story be swept under the rug. Whether you believe in the conspiracy theories or not, there's something deeply moving about that level of devotion and determination. Kurt Cobain gave voice to a generation that felt voiceless. He spoke truth to power through his music and his attitude, and he refused to compromise his artistic vision for commercial success. In many ways, the ongoing investigation into his death is a continuation of that spirit, a refusal to accept easy answers when the truth might be more complicated and more important. The reality is that we may never know with absolute certainty what happened in that greenhouse on April 5, 1994. The passage of time, the limitations of forensic science, and the complexity of human motivation all work against definitive answers. But the search for truth, the refusal to stop asking questions, and the determination to honor Kurt's memory by seeking justice. These are the things that keep his spirit alive in ways that go far beyond his music. So what do you think? Are these new handwriting analysis findings the smoking gun that conspiracy theorists have been waiting for? Or are they just another chapter in a mystery that will never truly be solved? Have we been living with a lie for 30 years? Or are we seeing patterns where none exist? The beauty of cases like this is that they force us to think critically, to question authority, and to never stop seeking truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable or incomplete. Whatever you believe about Kurt Cobain's death, one thing is undeniable. His impact on music, culture, and the lives of millions of fans continues to resonate 3 decades later. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most important truth of all. If this deep dive into one of music's greatest mysteries fascinated you as much as it did me, make sure to hit that like button and let me know in the comment what you think about these explosive new developments. Do you believe the handwriting analysis changes everything, or do you think we're chasing shadows? And if you want to stay updated on all the latest celebrity mysteries, scandals, and breaking entertainment news, that subscribe button is your ticket to never missing a story that matters. Until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking truth, and keep the music alive.